Forty20 Newscast.
Good afternoon and welcome along to the Forty20 Newscast. Today is Friday the 28th of August. My name is Tom Coates and I am joined by Tom Alderson. We are the co-founders of Forty20 News. The rain is pouring here in West Yorkshire as we record this, and I imagine it isn't much brighter the other side of the Pennines where Tom is. And the outlook, sadly, hasn't been too bright for our sport this week either. Starting with coronavirus causing chaos once again. We've had postponements, we've had players named, we've had fears for the season. Leeds Rhinos coach Richard Agar worrying whether we will complete the season. Halfback Luke Gale this morning in his Yorkshire Evening Post column echoing those fears. And then just this afternoon, a statement released by Wakefield owner Michael Carter, an exasperated statement announcing that David Fifita has been stood down from first team duties after refusing to comply with instructions to wear GPS track and trace equipment. Tom, it's a topic that's likely to dominate for a while yet. Is there a way forward for Super League? Is there hope of us finishing the season?
Well, I'm certainly less confident than I was at the start of August when the sport was gearing up to come back. I mean, if you just look at what's happened in, little under 4 weeks, it's just been absolute chaos for the sport. It just seems to be sort of one blow after another, one barrier after another that we have to overcome. And you have to think now, certainly in terms of the logistics of the season, it's hard not to think the same way as Richard Agar, Luke Gale. It's how many more disruptions, how many more outbreaks can we have at clubs where fixtures are having to be changed? How many times can Super League do this before there simply aren't enough days in the year left to get all of these fixtures in? We've had multiple postponements. Hull FC's haven't played a game for 2 weeks. They've got a Challenge Cup game on the horizon that's been pushed back now. We've had Catalan's game this week postponed. These games all have to be fitting somewhere else to what's already a congested fixture list. You can't help but think if we keep encountering these problems and games keep getting postponed whilst clubs and players have to isolate, that we are going to run out of room in the calendar. Having said that, at the moment, it is still feasible, and I think we should continue playing. I don't think that sort of turning around and calling it quits is the answer, although I'm pretty sure that nobody's really suggesting that one. In terms of stuff with David Fifita, very, very confusing statement, and a bit of a bizarre statement this morning about him refusing to wear this track and trace equipment. As far as I was aware, this GPS equipment, and I might be wrong, it might not be exactly the same thing, but I'm sure that professional players have been wearing GPS trackers in their shirts for a number of years now. So on the face of it, it seems like a bit of a bizarre way to break the sort of COVID protocols, and ultimately it's a huge blow for Wakefield. Wakefield have got plenty of injuries already, and he's very much a big enforcer in their side and one of their most dominant forwards. And not only is he sort of making it difficult for the administrators at the club, but on the field, Wakefield are losing a big enforcer for their team, which is really going to have an impact. And I don't understand it personally. I'm sure David's got his reasons for it, but it does seem on the face of it a very frustrating thing for Wakefield and a very bizarre circumstance that they're losing one of their star players for a reason such as that. And I'm sure that he'll, explain his reasons for it in due course, but it doesn't really help Wakefield at this moment in time.
Yeah, not many answers forthcoming at the moment in terms of the reasoning why he isn't wearing the equipment. We just know that he isn't. Very confusing. Not on the part of Wakefield. I think Michael Carter's said all the right things in his statement, reaffirming their commitment to controlling coronavirus, taking action against players not supporting that, but confusion in the sense that why? Everybody's really confused why he's choosing not to wear it. I think more broadly speaking as well, I agree with you. We're not at the point yet where it isn't feasible to continue. However, I do think we're almost at the stage now where we need to be almost totally pragmatic in our fixture planning. Super League obviously spent a lot of time weaving together a fixture list to fulfill fixtures. But with the number of teams being affected and the imbalance in schedules. It's almost a case of we make it up as we go along. We look at which teams are available to play, and we make fixtures on that basis, and tell coaches and players they're going to have to prepare to play for whoever's available. If what we've seen this week continues into the weeks ahead. Ultimately, though, it's not anything groundbreaking, but we have a contract with Sky Sports that we have to honour to get Sky Sports' money. And if we don't honour it, we won't get the money. And I think that's the key thing that's driving us forward. And that's Michael Carter, in fact, alluded to it in his statement that the whole sport has to pull together to complete this season, to tick that box, to get that funding that we need. Earlier this week, slightly different issue, but nonetheless important, no less important, I should say. Neil Hudgell announcing his departure from Hull KR, a very long-serving figure at the club. It's a story, actually, that our reporter John Davidson discovered early on in the morning, and he worked with the club towards a timing plan for announcing it, giving the club a chance to inform players and to inform staff. We were quick to announce it as soon as the information did leak out. But yeah, looking at the story itself, a huge loss for Hull KR, somebody that we understand made a significant financial contribution to the club on a yearly basis. And interestingly, these last few days, we've seen Tony Smith seem to suggest that Neil Hudgell's dissatisfaction with the RFL and Super League's collaboration with Toronto has been a factor in his decision to leave. What do you make of all of it, Tom?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's obviously quite a bit of a blow, I suppose, for Hull KR in the sense that, you know, Neil Hudgell has spent, as you've already mentioned, a long period of time really sort of supporting and helping financially fund Hull KR and has made them into sort of the stable Super League club that they are now, albeit going through the challenges of coronavirus as all of the other clubs are. And if that is true, and the sort of the way that the game is sort of managing the Toronto issue, among other things, other bits of politics around the sport, is sort of ushering Hudgell out the door, or has made it, you know, to the point where Hudgell thinks that he needs to walk away from the sport, then that's a little bit disappointing. It's always hard. It's always disappointing to lose figures like this in the game. I'm a big believer that sports clubs, the clubs, particularly rugby league clubs, shouldn't be reliant on, you know, wealthy benefactors. In an ideal world, all of the clubs would be self-sustaining businesses, but I know that that's not how the world is at the moment. That's not how Super League is or rugby league is as a sport. But ultimately, it's a little bit of a disappointing news for Hull KR, and it's the end of an era, I suppose, at Hull KR as well. Interesting again that Tony Smith has also said in a statement about him, about Neil, that it was probably the right time in terms of the club and the direction of the club and how they move forward from this. And it'll be very interesting to see, you know, how Hull KR come out of this. Initially out of the 2020 season with everything that's happening with COVID, but then also how they move on with their business model moving forward. But certainly a man who's contributed hugely to the Robins over the last however many seasons, and, you know, he'll be a big miss for the club.
100%. A really big loss to the sport as well, it has to be said. It's interesting because Neil has been very vocal on the subject of Toronto for a number of months, and his name's popped up on our newscast quite often on that very subject. So, in that sense, it does. You would suggest that it does add up, that perhaps there is something at work with Super League and Toronto that's proved to be the final straw, and it's forced his hand. But whatever the reason is, it's very sad. A sort of source of optimism, I guess, for Hull KR is looking at how Salford have made the transition after Marwan Kukash's departure, with people like Ian Blease working behind the scenes to stabilise that club and to put in place a sustainable model that isn't dependent on the generosity of a benefactor. And we saw that reach a crescendo last year with them reaching the grand final at Old Trafford. So fantastic to see how that club's evolved beyond the single ownership model. So hopefully Hull KR can follow a similar path. Mentioned Toronto there, another team that will stay in the news regardless of the fact that they're not actually playing any matches. Plenty of stuff being said. Bob Hunter, their chairman, very vocal in the media, The latest we know now is that the man in the box seat to become the new owner is in fact somebody who was a shareholder at the very start of Toronto's history, and that they do still have eyes fixed very much on taking their place in Super League next year, and they're very optimistic about meeting Super League's deadlines for putting a package together. As this story rumbles on, and as we hear these positive noises coming out of Toronto against the backdrop of their current players not being paid, which is something we can't ignore. But as we seem to see Toronto edging closer to having new owners, and as we hear more and more about the necessity of Super League being a 12-team competition, are you starting to believe that we could see the Wolfpack in Super League next year, Tom?
Well, the narrative's changing all the time, isn't it? And like you say, it's been a saga almost that's dominated the headlines for as long as I can remember now in recent weeks. And at first, the outlook looked extremely bleak. I personally didn't think that I could see a way back for Toronto, certainly not into Super League in 2021. But like you say, Bob Hunter now very confident that there's a real contender emerged to take over the Wolfpack, and interesting and probably quite encouraging that it's somebody who was involved from the very start of the process, which shows that there's still some internal drive there and some internal support within the sort of boundaries of the club that don't want to see it fold, and which ultimately, as a sport, I think it would be a real shame and a real disappointment to see the club sort of fold or fall out of existence completely. The big one for me is Super League. Does a club that has pulled out of its contractual obligations for whatever reason halfway through a season, effectively leaving 11 other clubs almost in the lurch, you have to ask the question: do they deserve to be in Super League next year? And I'm not too sure on what my opinion is on that one. I'm a little bit undecided. I think logistically there's an argument made for keeping them in the league, etc., because of the arrangements from this year can flow into next year. But there's certainly been some murmurs from other clubs who find it puzzling that it's even been debated allowing them back into the Super League next year potentially. And there's been a lot of Championship clubs making a lot of noise, making their case to take their place. So, but it does sound like we are gearing up towards a final solution for this, which involves securing Toronto's future, and it does sound more and more like it will be in Super League next year, which is very interesting. We'll have to wait and see what officially develops and unfolds, but it doesn't sound like it's too far off either way.
Yeah, it's a surprising evolution, really. We did seem to be petering out to the point where Toronto would just fade away and we wouldn't hear from them again, but they're very much still on our radars, and they're very much gunning for a place. To me, there's three things that need to be satisfied. The first thing is we need clarity that Super League does indeed need to be a 12-team competition in order to satisfy Sky's contract demands. Secondly, Toronto the new ownership needs to ensure that the players are paid what they're owed this year. And then I think thirdly, it's just a case of that there is no way that you can possibly justify Leigh, London, or Featherstone coming into Super League. They can all make strong cases, but it's impossible to sort of say that one deserves it more than another, because all three, you'd have to argue, can make good cases. If that does happen, and we do see a team from the Championship moving up to take Toronto's place, then there is a knock-on effect. We've seen this week Barrow chairman Steve Neal has officially made his club's case for promotion to the Championship should a Championship team be promoted. So it's a very interesting domino effect we could potentially see. Elsewhere, though, outside of Super League, the autumn competition, a little bit of exclusive news we brought to you on 4020 News around the start of the week, which was very quickly confirmed by the club, and that is Leigh Centurions withdrawing from the autumn competition. Now, the Leigh owner, Derek Beaumont, had previously gone on the record to state his club's intentions to enter the competition, following the sheer number of season ticket holders pledging to donate their money back to the club, putting Leigh in a position to enter, and very excited about joining the competition. It looking like it being a 5-team competition alongside Batley, Dewsbury, Barrow and Bradford. However, Leigh are no longer interested. They have issues around player availability, which means they cannot enter a team. Do you see this competition going ahead, Tom?
I think really, the longer this develops, I'd have to say no. I think that whatever the RFL's expectations were of this tournament, in the backlash of cancelling the championship and League One seasons for this year, I think that they'll probably be extremely disappointed by the level of uptake that the tournament has had. As you say, only 4 clubs confirmed in it now, with Lee. Looked like they were almost certainly going to participate. Now seeing it's not worth it for them, or that they're not able to do so. An alarming number of clubs from both divisions citing that it's just not financially or player welfare wise feasible for them to enter the tournament, and the whole thing, to be honest with you, from my point of view, just looks to be a little bit of a mess. Really, it's kind of seems like a very sort of it seems like with the way that everything has unfolded afterwards and all of the teams pulling out, that it was a very sort of quick afterthought, almost a way of compensating the clubs in the second and third division, and a way of giving them some games, which I totally understand, but it has to be right for the clubs, and it doesn't seem like the RFL have fully understood the situations that these clubs find themselves in, the real sort of extents of the financial struggles they're going through, and obviously the issues with the player welfare, the simple length of time that players haven't played, and not only haven't played, but these part-time clubs haven't trained, and they're all still on furlough, etc. It really has turned into a bit of a logistical nightmare, and I wouldn't be surprised if the whole thing's scrapped, which is bad news, obviously, for the clubs such as Dewsbury, Battley's, Bradfords that have come forward and said that they're willing to participate. But I'm not sure how much validity that tournament will have with only 4 teams in, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's interesting that word validity, and it's a very good point, and certainly the position we're at the moment is a million miles away of what was in the RFL's mind's eye when they announced these plans for an autumn tournament. I'm sure that their hope was that we'd see the majority of clubs participate, potentially having groups, potentially having quarterfinals, and all of that stuff. Obviously, the best case scenario now is we have a 4-team tournament, but validity. I mean, if you have 4 teams willing to play, then I don't think there's anything to say that they shouldn't be allowed to. If you have a round robin tournament that gives each of those 4 teams 3 fixtures, then you can potentially play a final. So it's not brilliant. It's not going to rival the championship. It's not going to rival League One, but it's matches, and the prize money is there. The prize pot has been announced and presumably earmarked for that tournament. So the money is there to be won. So, yeah, interesting to see what will happen. We understand a decision from the RFL is imminent, or to the extent that we did expect one this week. So I don't imagine we'll have to wait long until we get clarity. All those that were to withdraw appear to have withdrawn now, and all those that wanted to enter appear to have announced their intentions to enter. So it is really down to the RFL now to make a decision. So we'll see what happens. Last of all, before we get onto our match predictions, a story that's really captured the imagination in very much the wrong way. This is Super League's commercial partnership with Papa John's, the pizza takeaway. Some reporting by TotalRL.com's Matt Shaw exposed, really, I suppose, what was clear and obvious in front of us the whole time was that there is no money changing hands. Now, historically, the RFL and Super League, I mean, it is the Super League, we should say, not the RFL, have put press releases out around commercial deals, and it's very rare that you see figures mentioned. You look at when they announced Dacia with England, when they announced Betfred, it's extremely rare, and in those cases it didn't happen either. It's extremely rare that you see figures quoted. And I think somebody made an off-the-cuff comment actually in response to one of our tweets asking, "Oh, are they getting any money, or is it just pizza?" And Matt's obviously gone ahead and investigated this and confirmed that it is indeed just pizza. Now, I'm going to take a controversial viewpoint here, and I'm not doing it just for the sake of it, because if you do the sums and you do a little bit of amateur mathematics and you work on the basis that pizza is £6 and there are 10 pizzas per team, that's £60, £120 per game, and there's 30 plus games. So you're already looking at around £4,000 for what Papa John's getting in return, which is perimeter advertising. Now, I think the mistake that Super League made here was issuing it in a press release and making a big song and dance about it. I think they've left themselves exposed there. I think had you done a deal behind the scenes where you got £4,000 worth of pizzas in return for perimeter advertising, I don't think there's any harm done. but it's obviously ended up being a bit of an embarrassment. We've had reports in Australia carrying this story. What's your stance on it? Is it a humiliation for Super League, or has it been blown out of proportion?
I think, to be honest, and I've sounded really negative this afternoon. I don't know what it is, but I can't see it anything other than an embarrassment. Really, I completely agree with you that if this is a partnership that they've struck up, I really don't think the scale of it and the details of it needed to be made public to everybody else, purely because all I can really do is compare it to other sports, and I know that that's not the best practice because rugby league is what it is. It's not comparable in a scale sense financially to other sports, etc. But I think to myself, like, what other full time professional sports would sort of settles maybe the wrong word, but would strike up sponsorship deals where you literally get no money, and it's something as almost sort of laughable as pizzas. And I know what you're saying, that they are obviously making a saving there of and supplying the players with food, and that's, I'm not understating that, but as you said, your sort of amateur mathematics states that could be around the £4,000 mark. Like, really, for a top level sport that's looking to grow its profile in the UK sport, that's a little bit embarrassing. Really, I think it's not something that you'd ever see other sports sort of brag about a little bit. So I do agree with that. It's obviously not a bad thing for the sport in the long and short of it to have something like this. It's better than nothing. But you're absolutely right. They have opened themselves up for ridicule, and it is further evidence of the sport making itself look a little bit amateurish, really, in certain ways. I really don't think that the sport, somebody who's followed the sport for a long time, it's easy for me to sit here and not come up with a list of ways that we can resolve this, but I really think that there is a narrative around the sport shooting itself in the foot sometimes about how it looks from the outside looking in, and at the end of the day, it's about getting appeal and about getting more people to play it, getting more bums on seats in stadiums, getting more people to watch it. And certain things like this really don't help that cause.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they've shot themselves in the foot by trying to make a big song and dance about it. And I think obviously Papa John's internationally recognised name. It's one of the big three pizza companies, and I think they got a little bit carried away with the fact they've got this relationship. And I'm sure that they're hoping it does lead into a monetary relationship where money does change hands. But yeah, it being pizza is not great, and it's left them with their egg on the face a little bit, unfortunately. And we will close off with matters on the field. There are matches taking place this weekend, mercifully, and we are very much looking forward to them. 2 games on Saturday, starting at 4:15 p.m. with Wigan against Castleford. How do you see this one going, Tom?
I think that Wigan will win this one it'll be a close one. I think Wigan by 4 points. Castleford were impressive in defence against Saints, but Wigan are on a bit of a roll, so Wigan by 4.
Yeah, I'm with you on their performance against Saints. They showed a lot in that, in keeping the best attacking team in Super League to 10 points. But I think Wigan will have too much for them, so I'm going to say Wigan by 8. Rounding off Saturday, 6:30 p.m. kickoff for Leeds Rhinos versus Salford. What's your prediction for this one?
I think that fucking hell, I've forgotten what you even said in terms of the fixture. Who was Salford playing? Leeds.
Okay, wait, leave one second. Next up, no, you're right. Next up on Saturday, 6:30 p.m. Leeds Rhinos against Salford. How do you see this one going, Tom?
I think this is the game of the round for me. Leeds have got a point to prove after 2 losses, but against quality opposition, whereas Salford were very, very impressive in their last game, but they haven't played for 2 weeks, so that will be a factor. But I think Salford will edge this by 4 points.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one, this, actually. You got Leeds Rhinos, the established name in Super League. You got Salford, the underdogs, coached by a man who does get the best out of his players. I'm going to go with a Salford win by 6 points. On to Sunday then, and 3 games to enjoy, starting at 1 p.m. with Hull KR against St Helens. There's got to be only one winner here, Tom.
Yeah, unfortunately for Hull KR, I think they're way off where Saints are at the moment. Saints are on another level to everybody else, and for that reason, it'll be Saints by 24 for me.
I'm going Saints by 30. I will put an asterisk alongside that, though, because if there's one coach that can achieve an upset, it is Tony Smith. I think he's got the savvy and the nous to disrupt St Helens, but I don't think that'll happen. I think St Helens will win easily. We follow that up with Huddersfield against Hull FC at 4:15. What is your prediction for this one?
As a Hull FC tragic, I'd like to see Hull bounce back from what was an absolutely appalling performance against Salford. Really worrying signs for them, and the fact that they haven't played or trained for 2 weeks. I think they'll be even more physically underdone than they were mentally against Salford. And I think although Huddersfield sort of struggled the last couple of weeks, they've got a few players out. I think that they'll win. Huddersfield win by 10 points.
Yeah, no, Aidan Caesar or Lee Gaskell for Huddersfield. It's looking like Caesar not likely to come over. His hamstring injury means a start for Ollie Russell and Oliver Holmes. So we will see how that or Thomas Holmes, I should say. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think Huddersfield win by 6 points in my prediction. And then finally, the last game of the round, 6:30 p.m. on Sunday, sees Warrington face Wakefield. A little bit of disruption for Wakefield, as we've already discussed, losing David Fifita. How do you see this one going, Tom?
I think purely Wakefield are a really battling side. They're a side that never give up, but they've just got too many men missing. For me, when they're full strength, they're a decent side, but too many stars out, including David Fifita. Warrington have looked strong over the last few weeks, and for that reason, I'll say Warrington by 18.
Yeah, Warrington looking one of the better sides since the restart, going about the business quite well. I'm with you on a Warrington win fairly comfortably. I'm going with Warrington by 28. But that'll do it for another very busy episode of the 4020 Newscast. Plenty of news around this week, as you can see. We'd like to thank you, as always, for listening, and we would like to also remind you that for magazine content from the 4020 archives added every day, and for the latest news and exclusive stories, visit 4020.news.
4020 Newscast.